In this lesson, we're going to explore how to use the insert into statement to put data in the relational tables in your database. So if you get back onto MySQL Workbench, we'll go from there. I've provided copies of the scripts that I'm using on Blackboard, but I encourage you to write them yourself at least once so that you can see how they work. So when you're inserting data into the database, the order matters as well. We can't put anything in the employee table yet because we have to have that referential integrity such that if we have an employee that has a foreign key of 1 for a position, that position must have a primary key in the position table of 1 already. So we'll start with the location in the position tables. The syntax for the statement starts with the keywords insert into, after which you can specify the schema as well as the table that you want to actually insert into. So right now the default schema is gold star, but just for good measure, I'm going to use the backtick character and indicate it once again. Use a dot, and you'll see that it's offering the autocomplete option of which table. So I can use the cursor to select a table, like the position. Now you'll notice that it doesn't include the backtick. The backtick is mainly there to protect against if you try to use a keyword as an object name, like you try to use date or something as a field name, it will treat it like a literal string. I think I would like to continue to enforce that, so I'm going to enclose position in the backtick as well. After naming the table that you want to insert into, what you'll have to do is specify the columns that you want to insert data into. And we'll do this inside a set of parentheses. So we want to put data into every single field, and so as such, we'll include every single field name in our code. So we have position ID, and again, every object, so objects being either the schema itself, a table, otherwise known as a relation, or an attribute or field or column, which are all interchangeable as well. Those I'll include inside the backtick. So position ID, then we have the title, then the education, the min salary, and the max salary. After that, just for good measure, so for readability, I'm going to put the next part of the statement on the following line. We have the keyword values, and here we'll use parentheses again to specify the actual values that we want to put into a record. And don't forget to wink at the end of the statement, like I tell the undergraduate students. So include that semicolon. So this record, we actually have 4 different positions. This one's going to be primary key 1, and it will have the title of account representative. Notice that I'm including account representative in the double quote. Now, it depends on the system that you're using. MySQL, you can use double quotes and single quotes interchangeably. In some systems, you can't do that. When would you want to use double quotes versus single quotes? The only time it matters is if you have a quotation actually as part of a string, which we do have an example of that in the employee table. Then we have the education level, so 4-year degree, which is another string. And what you'll notice is things will not work properly unless the values that you're putting in have the same data type as the data type that you specified when you were defining the table, followed by the min and the maximum salary. Now we declared these as decimal numeric types, so even though I'm putting them in and they look like integers, they should come out on the other end with 2 places past the decimal. So from here, I'm saving this script as a script called insert into, so you can do that as well if you like. Now let's run it and see what happens. So I'm going to hit the execute button, and what you'll notice is I have an error at the bottom. I wanted to show you this. I already ran this, so I already have this record in the database. So here you can see it's protecting against having a duplicate for a primary key. You'll see it says error code duplicate entry 1 for key primary. So if I wanted to run this again, I would have to effectively delete that record from the database. So this will seem like a bit of a detour, but when you're working on your project, this should come in handy. So what I want to do is first show you what's there already. So if I right click on the position table, I'm going to select rows, limit 1000. You could also write the query yourself to do this, which we'll do in a little bit. But you'll see that I already have data here. So for the purposes of demonstrating how to clear the data in case you want to practice, I will show you now how to write the delete query to do so. So here I'm going to edit this and write delete from, and I'll specify the schema, gold star, as well as the table name. And I'm going to say where position ID is not null. So basically I'm telling it to wherever there's a case where there is a position ID and it has a value, I would like to delete that record. So, and it's actually not going to work, but I want to show you why in a second so that you can fix this on your own machine. So if I hit the execute button, what you'll see is it's saying at the bottom, you are using safe update mode and you tried to update a table without a where that uses a key column. So we actually are going to disable safe mode. Safe mode is going to prevent you from doing horrible things to a database, deleting things that you don't mean to, but for the nature of the class, I think it's okay to disable. What I'm going to do is go to Edit, Preferences, and then click on the SQL editor. And then when I scroll down, I see Safe Updates is checked. I'm going to uncheck this. This will allow us to be able to update and delete without any trouble. Hit OK. And I think I'm going to need to restart it. Let's double check. Let me try to run this again. And yeah, so let's restart the workbench. So at this point, I have restarted the workbench and I'm going to go back to my delete query and run it. Now, this is actually pretty important as well. You'll see that I have another error, and the error is that it can't delete or update a row where there is that foreign key constraint going on. So if I'm trying to get rid of all of the positions and I have data in the employee table, which I do, if I try to delete the position, then I will fail to enforce that referential integrity. This will disappear and I'll no longer know what position this person is holding. So this is the reason I'm demonstrating this, is for you to be able to play around when you're working on your project. If you need to clear the tables, you don't have to do it manually each time. So I'm going to work backwards and delete from the employee table first, and then I can delete the rest of the information. So let me write a new query. So delete from, include the schema name, the table name, employee, where, and I'm going to use the primary key, where the primary key is not null, with my semicolon. Execute, and you'll see that that finally worked. So now if I open the employee table back up, you'll see that there's nothing there. And so now I should be able to delete from the other tables as well. So let's delete from the position table where the position ID is not null. Now that works just fine. And finally delete from the location table where location ID is not null. So it seems like we're working backwards, but this will be important information for you when you're working on your project. So now I have a clean database, nothing in the tables, and I can now demonstrate that the insert into statement will work. So it probably did work on yours, but this is just, you could practice deleting and reinserting if you would like. So I'll hit execute and you'll see that it did work just fine. So now if I want to see the result, I can go into the position table and select those rows, and you'll see that I have one record in there now. And you can also see that the decimal did kick in. So the representation is with 2 places past the decimal. So from here, what I'd like to do is demonstrate inserting into the other 2 tables so that you can see how that works, and a little bit of how the data type colors change. So let's do an example inserting into the location table. So insert into, and I can include the schema name, I don't have to. So insert into location, And then in parentheses, I have all of the field names. So location ID, city, address, state, zip code, and phone, and that with parentheses, and then we put the values in parentheses as well. So in this case, we have a primary key of 1, the string Atlanta, the string 450 Peachtree Road, the 2-letter string of GA, the zip. Now here I've made the zip an integer, but when it's stored, it will store it as a string. And then the string of parentheses 404, 333, 5555, and end that with a semicolon. Now, let me try to run this. You can see that because I've already inserted this record into the position table, that it's not going to run. So what I'm going to do is actually comment that out. I mentioned this in the last video, but in order to write a comment, a single line comment will just use a hashtag or a pound sign in front of the lines that we want it to skip. And then let's try to run it again. And we'll see that now it worked perfectly fine. Okay, so from here, before we put data in the employee table, what I'd like to do is finish putting data into the position and location table, just to make sure that whatever we put in the employee table, we have that foreign key already there. So what I've done is copied and pasted from the text on Blackboard. This is the script that's provided, and you can see all of the positions and locations here. So if I try to execute, you'll see I do get that error. What I need to do is just comment out the lines that we already ran and then run it again, and you'll see that all of the data was successfully put in the database. Now we're ready to show you the employee data insertion. So what I'm going to do is actually remove these comments. And in order to do a block comment here, in other words, a long comment, I'm going to use a slash and a star. And then where I want the comment to end, I'll include another star and a slash. So we'll comment that out, and now we can add the employee insert into statement. So we have the keywords insert into, we have our table name, employee, and then in parentheses, we have to list all of the fields that we're going to update. So SSN, last name, first name, hire date, salary, gender, performance, and then the foreign keys, position ID, and location ID. And then I'm going to move down a row and we'll put in the values. So here we do need to be a little bit careful. I was testing some things out. So we have the following social security number, 000010000. Now if we think back to how we defined the field in the physical schema, we indicated that this was going to actually be a varchar, so a string type. And we want to preserve that. If we don't preserve this, what's going to end up happening is for some reason, MySQL is going to say, okay, well, I guess you really meant you wanted it to be an integer. The same applies for the zip code, as you'll see. And if it thinks that we want it to be an integer, it's going to get rid of these zeros. So it'll effectively represent it this way. So in order to prevent that from happening, we want to make sure that we do indicate that it is a string, like so. What is it? 00001, so 9 digits. 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So make sure that it is in quotes. Followed by, we have another string. This is the name of the person. Now here is an example of where I show the use of the single quotes. So here we have a person's name. It's also set up this way to demonstrate something when we're doing the data retrieval queries. So not and then Holly is in single quotes. So the string itself contains quotes. So not Holly, where Holly is enclosed in single quotes and the whole string is enclosed in double quotes. The first name is Patricia, And then we have a date. So the date I've enclosed in single quotes, the year, the month, and the day. So 2004 10/01, followed by the salary, followed by the gender, performance, and then the 2 foreign keys. So you can see how the different data types look when you represent them, type them out like this. I'm going to make sure I add my semicolon, and then let's execute. And you can see that it did work. So we've now put this in the table. In order to see the result, we can right-click on employee and select those rows to see that it is in fact there. And we have that nice social security number that has all those leading zeros. Now here I've copied the rest of the statements in from the scripts provided on Blackboard, and to make sure that they run properly and we don't have a primary key violation, I'm going to comment out the first 2 lines so that it only runs the following lines, and then hit the execute button. And now we have data in all 3 tables that now we can conduct SQL queries on to do some data retrieval, ask some questions, and generate some reports.